The elevator doors slid open on the 47th floor, and Logan Pierce stepped out with a toolbox in hand and grease under his fingernails. He was nobody, a maintenance worker invisible to the executives who brushed past him without a glance. But across the marble lobby, Vaughn watched him move with the calm focus of someone solving a puzzle no one else could see. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know he was a single father working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. All she knew was that the way he fixed that elevator in 90 seconds, without hesitation, without wasted motion, meant he was different. And Vaughn didn't waste time on ordinary. If you want to see how a forgotten man becomes the most dangerous piece on the board, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button, drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and let's begin. Logan Pierce had learned a long time ago that the world didn't care about what you could do, only what you looked like while doing it. At 32, he'd already lived through more reinventions than most people managed in a lifetime. College dropout, failed startup founder, divorced husband, single father. And now, for the last 8 months, he'd been a maintenance technician at Zenith Tower, a glass and steel monument to wealth that stretched 60 stories into the sky. Every day, he showed up in a navy blue uniform with his name stitched across the chest, carried a toolbox that weighed more than his son, and fixed the things that people with corner offices didn't even notice until they stopped working. He was good at it, better than good. Logan had a way of seeing systems, mechanical, electrical, structural, the way some people saw music. Patterns emerged where others saw chaos. Problems announced themselves before they became disasters. He could listen to the hum of an HVAC unit and know it would fail in 2 weeks. He could watch an elevator hesitate for half a second and predict the exact cable that needed replacing. But nobody asked him how he knew. They just expected him to show up, fix it, and disappear. That was fine. Logan didn't need recognition. He needed the paycheck. He needed the health insurance. He needed to keep his head down and his son fed, and if that meant being invisible, so be it. It was a Tuesday night, nearly 8 o'clock, when the call came through his radio. Logan, we've got an issue on 47. Executive elevators stuck between floors. VIP inside. Get up there now. Logan set down the wrench he'd been using to tighten a loose pipe in the basement and grabbed his toolbox. He didn't run. Running made people nervous, but he moved with purpose. The executive elevator was a different beast from the ones the rest of the building used. Faster, quieter, more expensive, and far more temperamental. When he reached the 47th floor, a small crowd had gathered near the elevator bank. Security guards in crisp black suits, an assistant in heels that clicked like a metronome against the marble. And standing a few feet back, arms crossed, expression unreadable, was a woman Logan had seen before but never spoken to. Vaughn. Even if you didn't know her name, you'd know she mattered. She stood like someone who owned the air around her, shoulders back, chin level, gaze direct. She wore a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked like it had been designed specifically for her body, and her dark hair was pulled into a low knot that suggested she didn't have time for anything decorative. No jewelry except a watch that probably cost more than Logan's car. No makeup except what highlighted the sharp angles of her face. She was 30 years old and worth more money than Logan could conceptualize. Vaughn Capital was her empire, a venture firm that specialized in taking dying companies and either reviving them or dismantling them for parts. She had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and utterly uninterested in anything that didn't produce results. Logan had seen her twice before, once in the lobby, walking past him without a glance, once in the parking garage, talking on her phone in a language he didn't recognize. Both times, she'd moved through the world like someone who didn't need permission to exist in it. Now she was stuck in an elevator, and Logan's job was to get her out. He approached the control panel and popped it open. The assistant hovered at his elbow. "How long is this going to take?" "Depends," Logan said, scanning the readout. "Could be 2 minutes. Could be 20. She has a meeting in 15. Logan didn't look up. "Then she's going to be late." The assistant made a small, frustrated noise and stepped back, pulling out her phone. Logan tuned her out. He tested the circuits, checked the voltage, traced the fault back to a relay switch that had burned out. Simple fix. He pulled a replacement from his toolbox, swapped it in, and reset the system. The elevator hummed back to life. The doors slid open. Arya Vaughn stepped out, and the first thing she did was look directly at Logan. Not past him. Not through him. At him. "How long was I in there?" she asked. "About 6 minutes," Logan said. "And how long did it take you to fix it?" 90 seconds. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was recalibrating something. "Why the delay?" "Had to get up here from the basement, then had to open the panel and run diagnostics." "And if you'd been stationed on this floor?" "I'd have had you out in under 3 minutes." Arya tilted her head. "Why aren't you stationed on this floor?" Logan almost smiled. "Because the people on this floor don't break things as often as the people on the lower ones." That got a reaction. A brief flicker of something that might have been amusement. She studied him for another moment, and Logan had the unnerving sense that she was filing him away somewhere in that sharp, calculating mind of hers. Then she turned and walked toward the glass doors at the end of the hall, heels clicking in a rhythm that sounded like punctuation. Her assistant scrambled to follow. The security guards dispersed, and Logan was left standing alone with his toolbox, wondering what the hell had just happened. Logan got home a little after 10. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit a table. But it was clean, and it was theirs. His son Jamie was already asleep, sprawled across his bed with a stuffed dinosaur clutched under one arm. Logan stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him breathe. Jamie was 7, small for his age, with messy brown hair and a gap-toothed grin that made Logan's chest ache every time he saw it. He liked dinosaurs and building blocks and asking questions that Logan didn't always know how to answer. He was smart, too smart sometimes, and he had a habit of noticing things other kids didn't, like the fact that his mom wasn't around anymore. Logan had done his best to explain it in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Sometimes people can't be together, even if they want to. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you, it just means things got complicated. Jamie had nodded solemnly and said, "Is that why you're always tired?" Logan had laughed, even though it hurt. "Yeah, buddy, that's part of it." Now standing in the doorway, Logan felt the weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. He was tired. He was always tired. But he couldn't afford to stop, because stopping meant falling behind. And falling behind meant losing the fragile stability he'd built for Jamie. He pulled the door shut and headed to the kitchen. There was leftover spaghetti in the fridge, and he ate it cold, standing at the counter, scrolling through his phone, bills, emails. A reminder that Jamie's school field trip was next week, and he needed to send in $20. Logan set the phone down and rubbed his eyes. He used to have plans, big ones. He'd been good at strategy, at seeing the spaces between what people said and what they meant, at finding solutions no one else thought to look for. He'd started a company once, back before Jamie was born, a consulting firm that connected small businesses with underutilized resources. It had been scrappy and underfunded, but it had potential. And then his marriage fell apart, and the startup collapsed under the weight of everything else, and Logan had to choose between chasing a dream and keeping his son fed. It wasn't a hard choice, but it was a bitter one. He finished the spaghetti, rinsed the bowl, and headed to bed. Tomorrow was another shift, another day of being invisible, another day of fixing things for people who would never know his name. The next morning, Logan got a call from his supervisor. "Need you to check the HVAC system on 52. One of the executives is complaining about the temperature." "Which executive?" "Vaughn." Logan paused. "Arya Vaughn?" "That's the one. She says it's too cold. Get up there and figure it out." Logan hung up and grabbed his toolbox. He'd worked on 52 before. It was mostly private offices and conference rooms, the kind of space where people made decisions that affected thousands of lives without ever leaving their chairs. The HVAC system was temperamental, but it was well maintained. If Arya was complaining, it was probably something minor. When he arrived, her assistant met him at the door. "She's in her office, 3rd door on the right. Don't take long." Logan nodded and made his way down the hall. The office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum, shelves lined with books and awards, and things that probably had stories attached to them. Arya was sitting behind the desk, reading something on her tablet, and she didn't look up when Logan walked in. "Temperature issue?" Logan asked. It's freezing in here, Arya said, still not looking at him. I shouldn't need a coat to work in my own office. Logan set his toolbox down and walked over to the thermostat. It was set to 68 degrees, which was standard. He pulled the cover off and checked the wiring. Everything looked fine. He moved to the vent and held his hand up. The airflow was normal. The temperature was consistent with the setting. Thermostat's working, Logan said. Airflow's good. The system's doing what it's supposed to. Arya finally looked up. Then why is it cold? Logan glanced at the windows. They were huge, and the sun was hitting them at an angle that would make the room feel cooler than it actually was. He walked over and tested the glass. Single pane. No insulation. It's the windows, Logan said. They're not designed for this kind of sun exposure. The glass is letting heat escape faster than the HVAC can compensate. You'd need thermal blinds or a secondary layer of glazing to fix it. Arya leaned back in her chair. And how long would that take? Thermal blinds? A day? Maybe 2? Glazing? That's a construction project. Weeks. She was quiet for a moment, studying him with the same intensity she'd had in the elevator. You didn't need to check the thermostat to know that, did you? Logan shrugged. I checked it anyway. Better to be sure. But you already knew what the problem was. I had a guess. Arya stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. What's your name? Logan Pierce. How long have you worked here, Logan? 8 months. And before that? Logan hesitated. He didn't usually talk about his past, especially not with people like Arya Vaughn. But there was something in the way she asked, not curious exactly, but direct, like she was testing him. I did a lot of things, Logan said. Consulting, strategy, problem solving. Why'd you stop? Life got complicated. Arya turned to face him. That's a non-answer. It's the truth. She studied him for another long moment, and Logan had the sense that she was deciding something. Then she nodded, almost to herself, and walked back to her desk. Thank you, Logan. That'll be all. Logan picked up his toolbox and left, and as he walked down the hall, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. He didn't know what, but Arya Vaughn didn't ask questions without a reason, and Logan had the uncomfortable suspicion that he'd just become interesting to her. Well, over the next 2 weeks, Logan saw Arya more often than he expected. It started small. She'd call for maintenance requests that didn't quite make sense, a flickering light that turned out to be a loose bulb, a drawer that wasn't sticking at all. Logan would show up, fix the non-existent problem, and leave. And every time Arya would ask him something. How would you prioritize the repairs in this building if you had a limited budget? If you were designing this office, what would you change? What's the weakest point in this elevator system? At first, Logan thought she was just bored. Rich people did strange things when they had too much time on their hands. But the questions were too specific, too pointed. She wasn't making small talk. She was testing him. And Logan, despite himself, found that he enjoyed it. He hadn't used his brain like this in a long time. Not since the startup. Not since he'd been forced to choose between ambition and survival. Arya's questions weren't hypothetical. They were real problems, the kind that required thought and precision and a willingness to challenge assumptions. And when Logan answered, she didn't dismiss him or talk over him. She listened. It was disorienting and strangely addictive. One afternoon, Arya called him to her office for what she claimed was a malfunctioning laptop charger. Logan tested it. The charger was fine. You're doing this on purpose, he said. Arya didn't deny it. You're wasted in maintenance. Logan set the charger down. I'm good at maintenance. You're good at solving problems. That's not the same thing. It pays the bills. Does it? Arya's gaze was sharp. Or does it just keep you busy enough that you don't have to think about what you could be doing instead? Logan felt something tighten in his chest. I have a son. I don't get to chase maybes. I'm not talking about maybes. I'm talking about certainties. Arya leaned forward. You fixed my elevator in 90 seconds. You diagnosed a structural flaw in my windows without needing to measure anything. You've answered every question I've thrown at you with more precision than half my executive team. That's not maintenance-level thinking. That's strategic intelligence. So what? Logan said. You want to offer me a job? I want to see what you're capable of. Logan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I already know what I'm capable of. It doesn't matter. Why not? Because capability doesn't mean opportunity. I learned that the hard way. Arya tilted her head. What if I gave you the opportunity? Logan stared at her. She was serious. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the directness of her gaze. She wasn't playing. She was offering him something real, and that terrified him. I appreciate the offer, Logan said slowly. But I can't. I've got Jamie. I've got routines. I can't afford to risk that. The risk implies uncertainty, Arya said. I'm offering you certainty. Nothing's certain. Then let me be more specific. Arya stood and walked over to the window. I'm rebuilding my advisory team. I need someone who thinks differently. Someone who doesn't just follow best practices but questions whether they're actually best. Someone who can see the solution before the problem fully forms. She turned back to him. That's you, Logan, whether you admit it or not. Logan shook his head. You don't know me. I know enough. You know what I can do. You don't know what I've lost trying to do it. Arya's expression softened, just slightly, just enough to remind Logan that she was human under all that sharp professionalism. Then don't lose again. Come work for me. Prove that you're more than what the world decided you should be. Logan wanted to say no. He wanted to walk out of that office and go back to his toolbox and his predictable, exhausting, safe life. But something in Arya's voice, something that sounded almost like belief, made him pause. I need to think about it, he said. Take your time, Arya replied, but not too much. I don't like waiting. That night, Logan sat on the couch with Jamie curled up next to him, half asleep and clutching his dinosaur. The TV was on, playing some animated movie Jamie had seen a dozen times. Logan wasn't watching. He was thinking about Arya's offer. It was insane. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have experience in venture capital. He didn't have the right clothes or the right connections or any of the things people like Arya valued. All he had was a mind that worked in ways most people didn't understand, and a past full of failures that proved thinking differently didn't always lead to success. But Arya saw something in him. She'd gone out of her way to test him, to push him, to offer him a chance most people would kill for. And Logan couldn't deny that part of him, the part that used to dream big, that used to believe he could build something meaningful, was waking up again. Dad? Jamie mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, buddy. Are you happy? Logan blinked. What do you mean? You always look tired and sad. Are you happy? Logan's throat tightened. He pulled Jamie a little closer. I'm happy when I'm with you. But what about when you're not with me? Logan didn't have an answer for that, so he just kissed the top of Jamie's head and said, Go to sleep, buddy. Jamie yawned and snuggled deeper into the couch, and within minutes, he was out. Logan sat there for a long time, staring at the TV without seeing it, wondering if happiness was something he was even allowed to want anymore. 3 days later, Logan knocked on Arya's office door. She looked up from her desk, unsurprised. You've made a decision? I have conditions, Logan said. Arya gestured to the chair across from her. Let's hear them. Logan sat. I need flexible hours. I have to pick Jamie up from school most days. I need health insurance that covers both of us. And I need to know this isn't a trial run. If I do this, I need to know it's real. Arya nodded. Done. Anything else? Yeah, that Logan met her eyes. I need you to tell me why you're doing this. Why me? Arya leaned back in her chair, considering. Because I've spent my entire career surrounded by people who think inside boxes they don't even realize exist. They follow frameworks. They optimize for metrics. They're good at what they do, but they're predictable. And predictability is the enemy of innovation. She paused. You don't think like them. You see the system, and then you see past it. That's rare. And I don't waste rare. Logan felt something settle in his chest. Okay. Okay? I'll do it. Arya smiled, small, controlled, but genuine. Good. You start Monday. Logan's first day at Vaughn Capital was nothing like he expected. He showed up in the only suit he owned, a cheap, ill-fitting thing he'd bought for a job interview years ago, and immediately felt out of place. The office was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, and people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Logan kept his head down and followed Arya's assistant to a conference room where a small group was already gathered. Arya introduced him without ceremony. This is Logan Pierce. He'll be joining the advisory team on a trial basis. Logan, meet the people who will either respect you or resent you, depending on how useful you are. There were 5 of them. 2 men in their 40s, both wearing watches that cost more than Logan's rent. A woman in her 30s with perfect hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And 2 younger analysts who looked like they were trying very hard to seem older than they were. One of the men, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, extended a hand. Marcus Hale, VP of Strategic Development. Welcome aboard. Logan shook his hand. Thanks. What's your background? The woman asked. Her name was Diane, and her tone suggested she already knew the answer and didn't like it. Consulting, problem-solving, maintenance most recently. Diane's smile tightened. Maintenance. Yes. And now you're advising a venture capital firm. Apparently, Marcus laughed. Well, this should be interesting. Arya cut in before the conversation could spiral. Logan's here because he thinks differently. That's what we need. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to leave. No one left. The meeting began, and Logan quickly realized he was in over his head. They were discussing a potential acquisition, some tech company that made software for supply chain management. The numbers were staggering. The jargon was dense. The assumptions were built on frameworks Logan didn't recognize. But he listened. And as he listened, patterns started to emerge. An hour in, Marcus was explaining why the acquisition made sense. Their market share is growing. Their revenue model is solid. It's a clean fit for our portfolio. Logan raised his hand. Everyone turned to look at him. What happens when their primary client switches vendors? Logan asked. Marcus frowned. That's not a likely scenario. Why not? Because their contract is locked in for another 2 years. And after that, we'll reassess. Logan leaned forward. Their primary client accounts for 40% of their revenue. If that client switches vendors in 2 years, the company loses nearly half its income overnight. You're banking on the assumption that they'll renew, but you haven't accounted for what happens if they don't. The room went quiet. Diane spoke first. That's speculation. It's risk assessment, Logan said. And if you're not accounting for it, you're not doing your job. Marcus's expression hardened. And what would you suggest? Diversify their client base before the acquisition. Make it a condition of the deal. If they can't secure at least 3 more contracts of comparable size within 6 months, the valuation drops. Arya, who had been silent until now, leaned back in her chair. That's not a bad idea. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. It'll delay the deal. It'll protect the investment, Arya said. Logan's right. We're overweight on optimism and underweight on contingency. Adjust the terms. Marcus didn't argue, but the look he gave Logan made it clear that he'd just made an enemy. Over the next few weeks, Logan fell into a rhythm. He worked long hours, but Arya kept her word about flexibility. He picked Jamie up from school most days. He made dinner. He helped with homework. And then, after Jamie was asleep, he'd pull out his laptop and dive back into the work that was slowly consuming his life. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in years, Logan felt like his brain was being used the way it was meant to be. He was solving real problems, making real decisions. And people were listening to him. Not all of them, of course. Marcus barely hid his resentment. Diane tolerated him, but didn't trust him. The younger analysts looked at him like he was an anomaly they couldn't quite categorize. But Arya listened, and that was enough. One evening, after a particularly brutal meeting, Arya found Logan in the break room, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. You look like you're questioning every decision you've ever made, she said. Logan laughed. Just the recent ones. Arya poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. You're doing well. Marcus doesn't think so. Marcus is threatened by you. That means you're doing something right. Logan shook his head. I don't want to make enemies. Then you're in the wrong business. Arya took a sip of her coffee. People like Marcus have spent their entire careers building walls around their authority. When someone like you comes in and starts punching holes in those walls, they panic. It's not personal. It's survival. Feels personal. It always does. Arya set her cup down. But here's the thing, Logan. You're not here to make friends. You're here to make things better. And if that means stepping on toes, so be it. Logan looked at her. Is that how you've done it? Stepped on toes? Arya smiled faintly. I've broken a few feet along the way. They sat in silence for a moment, and Logan found himself wondering what it cost someone like Arya to be the person she was. She was brilliant, no question. But brilliance came with a price, and Logan suspected hers was loneliness. Can I ask you something? Logan said. Go ahead. Why do you care so much about this? About me? Arya's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough to reveal something beneath the armor. Because I used to be where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. And no one gave me a chance. I had to take it. I had to fight for every inch of ground I stand on now. She paused. You're not like me, Logan. You have something I don't. What's that? You still believe people are worth the effort. Logan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, and they finished their coffee in silence. The breakthrough came on a Friday. Arya had called an emergency meeting. One of their major investments, a renewable energy startup, was on the verge of collapse. The CEO had mismanaged funds, the board was in chaos, and investors were threatening to pull out. It was a disaster, and Arya's reputation was on the line. Marcus and Diane had been working on a rescue plan for days, but everything they proposed involved either massive capital injections or slow, painful restructuring that would take months. Neither option was viable. Logan sat in the corner of the conference room, listening as they argued in circles. And then, in the middle of Marcus's third explanation of why a bridge loan was the only option, Logan saw it. Stop, Logan said. Everyone turned to look at him. The problem isn't the funding, Logan said. It's the leadership. The CEO's the issue. He's lost the board's trust, and no amount of money is going to fix that. You need to replace him. Marcus scoffed. We can't just fire the CEO. He's the founder. Then buy him out, Logan said. Offer him a golden parachute. Make it generous enough that he'll take it. Then bring in someone the board actually trusts. And who would that be? Diane asked. Logan pulled up the startup's org chart on his laptop. The COO. She's been running operations for 2 years. She's competent. She's respected. And she's not tainted by the CEO's mistakes. Put her in charge. Stabilize the board and the investors will calm down. Arya leaned forward. What about the optics? Firing the founder looks bad. Not if you frame it right, Logan said. Position it as him stepping down to focus on innovation. Give him a board seat with no real power. Make it look like a promotion, not a termination. The room was silent. Then Arya smiled. Do it. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded and started typing. Within 48 hours, the CEO was out, the COO was in, and the investors were back on board. The startup stabilized. The crisis was averted. And Logan, for the first time in his life, realized what it felt like to be indispensable. The Monday after the renewable energy crisis, Logan walked into the office and found a different nameplate on his desk. It no longer said consultant. It said senior strategic advisor. He stared at it for a moment, then looked up to find Arya standing in the doorway of her office, watching him. You earned it, she said simply, then turned back inside. Logan sat down, set his coffee on the desk, and tried to process what had just happened. Senior Strategic Advisor. The title came with a salary increase he hadn't negotiated, benefits that actually covered Jamie's asthma medication without a fight, and an office 3 doors down from Arya's. It also came with something far more dangerous, expectations. People noticed him now. Not just Arya, but everyone. The analysts who used to ignore him started asking his opinion in meetings. The executives who dismissed him as Arya's pet project began watching him with wary calculation. And Marcus Marcus had stopped pretending to be friendly altogether. Logan felt the shift like a change in air pressure before a storm. He'd been useful before. Now he was becoming necessary. And in a world like Vaughn Capital, necessity made you either powerful or a target, sometimes both. That afternoon, Marcus cornered him in the hallway outside the elevator bank. He didn't say hello. He just stood there, blocking Logan's path, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Marcus said. Logan shifted his bag on his shoulder. "About what?" "About the fact that you've been here 2 months and you're already making decisions that should go through me first." "I don't make decisions," Logan said evenly. "I make recommendations. Arya makes the decisions." "Semantics." Marcus stepped closer. "You humiliated me in front of the entire advisory team with that renewable energy play." "I solved a problem you couldn't solve. That's not humiliation. That's just reality." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You think you're smarter than everyone here, don't you?" "No," Logan said. "I think I see things differently." "There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." Marcus leaned in, lowering his voice. "Let me give you some advice, Pierce. You might have Arya's ear right now, but that won't last. She burns through people like you. She finds someone shiny and new, uses them until they're not useful anymore, then discards them. You're not special. You're just convenient." Logan met his gaze without flinching. "If that's true, then you've got nothing to worry about. I'll be gone soon enough." "That's not the point." "Then what is?" Marcus hesitated, and for a brief moment, Logan saw something underneath the anger, something that looked almost like fear. "The point is that you don't understand how things work here. You don't have the background. You don't have the relationships. You're operating on instinct and luck, and eventually, both of those run out." Logan considered that. "Maybe. But until they do, I'm going to keep doing my job. And if that bothers you, take it up with Arya." "Papasa Chaco." He stepped around Marcus and walked toward the elevator. Behind him, he heard Marcus mutter something under his breath, but Logan didn't turn around. There was no point. Marcus wasn't going to change his mind, and Logan wasn't going to apologize for being good at what he did. When he got home that night, Jamie was sitting at the kitchen table, struggling with his math homework. Logan dropped his bag by the door and sat down across from him. "How's it going, buddy?" Jamie looked up, frustrated. "I don't get it. Mrs. Patterson says I have to show my work, but I already know the answer. Why do I have to write it all out?" Logan smiled. He'd had the same argument with his own teachers when he was Jamie's age. Because sometimes knowing the answer isn't enough. People want to see how you got there. "That's dumb." "Maybe. But it's the rule." Jamie scowled and went back to his worksheet, scribbling numbers with more force than necessary. Logan watched him for a moment, then reached over and gently took the pencil out of his hand. "Let me show you a trick," Logan said. "Instead of thinking about it as showing your work, think about it as telling a story. The problem is the beginning. The answer is the end. The steps in between are what happened in the middle." Jamie blinked. "Math is a story?" "Everything's a story if you look at it right." They worked through the problems together, and by the time they finished, Jamie was smiling again. Logan made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, burnt on one side because he got distracted answering an email from Diane, and they ate in front of the TV, watching a nature documentary about sharks. "Dad?" Jamie said, halfway through an episode about great whites. "Yeah? Are you happy now?" Logan paused, the question hitting harder than it should have. Jamie had asked him the same thing a few weeks ago, and Logan hadn't been able to answer. Now, sitting on the couch with his son tucked against his side, he thought about it. Was he happy? He was tired. He was stretched thin. He was navigating office politics he didn't fully understand and working with people who either resented him or wanted something from him. But he was also using his mind in ways he'd forgotten he could. He was solving problems that mattered. He was building something. "I think I'm getting there," Logan said finally. Jamie nodded, satisfied, and went back to watching sharks hunt seals in slow motion. Logan pulled him a little closer and tried not to think about Marcus's warning. "She burns through people like you." Maybe that was true. Maybe Arya would get bored of him, or maybe he'd make a mistake big enough that even she couldn't overlook it. But for now, he had a chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, proposals, and late-night phone calls with Arya, who seemed to operate on about 4 hours of sleep and twice as much caffeine as any human should consume. Logan learned quickly that her standards were ruthless. She didn't tolerate mediocrity, and she had no patience for excuses. If you said you could do something, you did it. If you couldn't, you didn't waste her time pretending otherwise. It was exhausting. It was also clarifying. Logan had spent so long trying to make himself smaller, less ambitious, less demanding, less visible, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be challenged. Arya didn't just challenge him. She pushed him past the point where most people would have quit, and then she pushed him further. And every time Logan thought he'd reached his limit, he found another gear he didn't know he had. But it wasn't just the work that was changing him. It was Arya herself. She was brilliant, no question, but she was also guarded in a way that made Logan wonder what it cost her to be the person everyone expected her to be. She never talked about her personal life. She never mentioned family or friends or anything that wasn't directly related to business. And when Logan asked her once if she ever took a day off, she'd looked at him like he'd suggested she set the building on fire. "Why would I do that?" she'd said. "Because you're human?" Barely. She'd said it like a joke, but Logan didn't think she was joking. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, Logan found Arya still in her office, staring at her laptop with the kind of intensity that suggested she was trying to solve a problem through sheer force of will. He knocked on the door frame. "You're going to burn out," he said. Arya didn't look up. "I don't burn out. I run hot. That's not sustainable. Neither is mediocrity, and yet the world is full of it." Logan stepped inside and sat down in the chair across from her desk. "What are you working on?" "A pitch for a manufacturing acquisition. The numbers don't add up, but the potential is there. I just need to figure out how to frame it so the board doesn't think I've lost my mind. Can I see?" Arya turned her laptop around. Logan scanned the spreadsheet, his eyes moving over the columns of data, the projected revenue, the risk assessment. It was solid work, but it was also safe. Too safe. "You're hedging," Logan said. Arya raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You're presenting this like you're not sure it's a good idea. You're giving them an out. If you want the board to trust you, you need to stop asking for permission and start telling them what's going to happen." "I can't just dictate terms to the board." "Why not? You own the majority share. They work for you, not the other way around." Arya leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You think I should just bulldoze them?" "I think you should stop pretending their opinion matters more than your instinct. You know this acquisition is worth it, so stop apologizing for it." Arya was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled her laptop back and started typing. Logan watched her rewrite the pitch in real time, stripping out the qualifiers, sharpening the language, turning a request into a declaration. When she finished, she turned the screen back toward him. "Better?" she asked. "Much." She smiled, small but genuine. "You're good at this." "At what?" "Seeing what people are too afraid to say out loud." Logan shrugged. "Someone has to." Arya closed her laptop and stood, walking over to the window. The city stretched out below them, lights flickering like stars in the haze. She stood there for a moment, arms crossed, and Logan had the sense that she was deciding whether or not to say something. Finally, she spoke. "I don't let people in. It's a rule I have. No attachments, no dependencies. It's cleaner that way." Logan didn't say anything. He just waited. "But you're different," Arya continued. "You don't want anything from me except the chance to prove yourself. And that's rare." "I'm not here to take advantage of you," Logan said quietly. "I know." Arya turned to face him. "That's why I trust you." The weight of those words settled between them, heavy and unspoken. Logan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, and after a moment Arya turned back to the window. "Go home, Logan," she said. "Your son needs you more than I do." Logan stood and headed for the door, but before he left, he paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're barely human. I think you're just scared of what happens if you let yourself be." Arya didn't respond. But as Logan walked down the hall, he thought he saw her shoulders relax, just slightly. The acquisition pitch went exactly as Arya predicted. The board pushed back, questioned the numbers, tried to find holes in the logic. And Arya, using the framework Logan had helped her build, shut down every objection with the kind of precision that left no room for argument. By the end of the meeting, the board had approved the deal unanimously. Afterward, Marcus pulled Logan aside in the parking garage. "That was your doing, wasn't it?" Marcus said. Logan unlocked his car. "I don't know what you're talking about. The pitch, the reframe. Arya doesn't operate like that. She's cautious, methodical, but today she was aggressive. That's you." "If it worked, does it matter?" Marcus stepped closer. "It matters because you're changing her. And when you change someone like Arya Vaughn, there are consequences." Logan looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something he hadn't noticed before. Marcus wasn't angry, he was worried. "What are you afraid of?" Logan asked. Marcus hesitated. "I've worked for Arya for 7 years. I've seen her take risks that would destroy most people. But she always had a safety net. She always had control. You're making her reckless. Or maybe I'm making her brave. There's no difference when you're operating at this level." Logan opened his car door. "Then I guess we'll find out." He drove home, Marcus's words echoing in his head. Was he making Arya reckless? He didn't think so. But he also couldn't deny that she'd started taking bigger swings since he'd joined the team. Bolder moves, faster decisions. It was working, so far. But Marcus was right about one thing. At this level, there was no margin for error. When Logan got home, Jamie was already asleep, sprawled across the couch, with a blanket half kicked off, and his dinosaur clutched under one arm. Logan smiled and carefully carried him to bed, tucking him in and brushing the hair off his forehead. "Love you, buddy," Logan whispered. Jamie mumbled something incoherent and rolled over. Logan stood there for a moment, watching him sleep, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on his shoulders. He was building something. He was proving himself. But he was also walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could send everything crashing down. The following week, Arya assigned Logan to lead a due diligence review on a potential investment, a logistics company that had been bleeding money for 2 years, but had technology that could revolutionize supply chain management. It was a high-risk, high-reward play, and the rest of the advisory team was skeptical. Logan spent 3 days digging through financial records, interviewing the executive team, and analyzing the market. And the more he looked, the more he realized the company wasn't failing because of bad technology. It was failing because of bad leadership. The CEO was a visionary, but he had no business sense. He'd poured money into R&D while ignoring basic operational inefficiencies. The COO was competent but overworked and undervalued, and the board was too fractured to make any real decisions. Logan compiled his findings into a report and presented it to Arya in her office. "The technology is solid," Logan said, "but the structure is broken. If we acquire them, we need to gut the leadership and rebuild from the ground up." Arya scanned the report. "That's expensive. Less expensive than letting the company collapse and losing the tech entirely. What's your recommendation?" Logan leaned forward. "Acquire them. Fire the CEO. Promote the COO. Bring in a financial officer who actually understands cash flow, and give them 6 months to prove they can turn it around. If they can't, we sell the tech and cut our losses." Arya looked up at him. "You're willing to bet on that?" "I am." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it." The acquisition moved forward, and Logan found himself in the strange position of being the one calling the shots. He negotiated the terms. He structured the transition. He sat across the table from the CEO and told him, politely but firmly, that his services were no longer needed. It was brutal. It was necessary. And it was the first time Logan realized he was capable of making decisions that would change people's lives, for better or worse. The CEO took it better than Logan expected. He shook Logan's hand, wished him luck, and walked out with his severance package and his dignity intact. The COO, a sharp woman named Karen, who looked like she hadn't slept in a month, nearly cried when Logan told her she was being promoted. "I thought I was getting fired," she said. "You're the only reason this company is still standing," Logan said. "We're not that stupid." Karen laughed, And it was the kind of laugh that came from relief and exhaustion and the sudden dizzying realization that things might actually get better. Over the next month, Logan worked closely with Karen to stabilize the company. He brought in a financial officer, streamlined the supply chain, cut unnecessary expenses, and restructured the R&D budget to focus on short-term wins that could generate revenue. It was grueling work, and there were days when Logan wasn't sure it was going to work. But slowly, the numbers started to improve. Revenue ticked up, expenses dropped. The technology started attracting interest from major retailers who'd been watching from the sidelines. And by the end of the quarter, the company was profitable for the first time in 2 years. Arya called Logan into her office the day the quarterly report came in. "You did it," she said. Logan shrugged. "Karen did most of the heavy lifting. I just gave her the resources she needed." "That's leadership, Logan." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Arya walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "I'm putting you in charge of the next acquisition. Full authority. You pick the target, you structure the deal, you run the integration." Oh, Logan's stomach dropped. "That's a lot of responsibility. You've earned it. What if I screw it up?" Arya turned to face him. "Then you screw it up, and we figure out how to fix it. That's how this works." Logan wanted to argue. He wanted to say he wasn't ready, that he needed more time, that the stakes were too high. But Arya was looking at him with the kind of confidence that made it impossible to say no. "Okay," Logan said. "I'll do it." Arya smiled. "I know." That night, Logan sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, staring at a list of potential acquisition targets. Jamie was asleep. The apartment was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, Logan felt something he'd almost forgotten: purpose. He wasn't just fixing elevators anymore. He wasn't just getting by. He was building something real, something that mattered. And as terrifying as that was, it was also the most alive he'd felt in years. But in the back of his mind, Marcus's warning lingered. "She burns through people like you." Logan didn't know if that was true, but he knew that if he was going to survive in Arya's world, he couldn't just be useful. He had to be irreplaceable, and that meant taking risks he wasn't sure he was ready for. The next morning, Logan walked into the office with a target in mind. It was a bold choice: a failing aerospace parts manufacturer with contracts tied to 3 major airlines. The company was drowning in debt, but the infrastructure was solid, and if Logan could renegotiate the contracts and bring in new management, it could be worth 10 times what they'd pay for it. He presented the idea to Arya over coffee in her office. "Aerospace?" Arya said, raising an eyebrow. "That's outside our usual scope." "Which is exactly why it's a good move," Logan said. "Everyone's focused on tech and green energy. Aerospace is overlooked, and this company has relationships we can't build from scratch. It's also a regulatory nightmare." "Only if we don't know what we're doing." Arya leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You really think you can pull this off?" "I do." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Then let's see what you're made of." Logan left her office with a knot of anxiety in his chest and a spreadsheet full of numbers that didn't quite add up yet. He had 6 weeks to make the deal work. 6 weeks to prove he wasn't just lucky. 6 weeks to prove Marcus wrong. And as he sat down at his desk and started digging into the aerospace company's financials, Logan realized something. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from failure. He was running towards something bigger. And that made all the difference. The aerospace deal consumed Logan's life in ways he hadn't anticipated. He'd thought the logistics acquisition was intense, but this was different. This was a company with union contracts, federal regulations, and a debt structure so tangled it took him 3 days just to map out who actually owned what. He worked late every night, often until 2 or 3 in the morning, then dragged himself home to catch a few hours of sleep before Jamie's alarm went off. His son had started asking questions Logan didn't know how to answer. "Why are you always on your computer? When are we going to the park again? Did I do something wrong?" That last one had hit Logan like a punch to the chest. "Nobody," he'd said, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just working on something really big right now, and it's taking up more time than I thought it would." Jamie had nodded, but his eyes said he didn't quite believe it. And Logan didn't blame him. He was starting to wonder if he'd made a mistake. Not with the deal, though that was still terrifyingly uncertain, but with the choice to dive this deep into a world that demanded more than he had to give. But he couldn't stop now. The aerospace company, called Apex Components, was bleeding money at a rate that would sink it within 4 months if nothing changed. The CEO had already been forced out by the board, and the interim leadership was barely holding things together. Logan had spent hours on the phone with union reps, airline executives, and accountants who all said the same thing in different ways. The company was toast. Logan didn't believe them. He'd seen the facilities. He'd read the contracts. He'd talked to the engineers who actually built the parts. And they were good. Better than good. The problem wasn't capability. It was cash flow and mismanagement, and a board that had spent the last 5 years making decisions based on quarterly earnings instead of long-term viability. 3 weeks into the due diligence, Logan sat in a conference room with Arya and the rest of the advisory team, presenting his findings. Marcus was there, arms crossed, looking like he'd already decided Logan was going to fail. Diane sat next to him, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. The 2 younger analysts, Trevor and Simone, looked nervous, like they were waiting for someone to start yelling. Logan pulled up the first slide. Apex Components is failing because it's trying to serve 2 masters. The airlines want cheap, reliable parts delivered on time. The board wants profit margins that don't exist in this industry anymore. You can't have both. Marcus leaned forward. So your solution is what? Tell the board to accept lower margins? My solution is to restructure the debt, renegotiate the airline contracts to include volume guarantees, and cut the board in half. Right now, there are 11 people making decisions, and none of them agree on anything. We need 3, maybe 4. Diane spoke up. You can't just fire a board. Not fire. Consolidate. Some of them retire. Some of them take advisory roles with no voting power. The ones who stay are the ones who actually understand aerospace, not just finance. But Marcus shook his head. This is insane. You're talking about gutting the entire leadership structure of a company we don't even own yet. We will own it, Logan said. And when we do, we need to move fast. If we spend 6 months trying to make everyone happy, the company dies and we lose everything. Arya, who had been silent until now, spoke. What's the timeline? Logan switched to the next slide. If we close the acquisition in 2 weeks, I can have the debt restructured in 30 days. The union contracts are up for renewal in 6 weeks, which gives us leverage. We renegotiate them before they expire. The airline contracts are the tricky part. We need to convince them that stability is worth paying a premium for, and right now they don't believe Apex can deliver stability. Can it? Arya asked. Logan met her eyes. If we do this right, yes. And if we don't? Then we're out $40 million and a reputation. The room went silent. Logan could feel Marcus staring at him, could sense Diane calculating whether this was going to blow up in their faces. But Arya didn't look away. She just studied him, like she was weighing something only she could see. Finally, she nodded. Do it. But Logan, if this falls apart, it's on you. I know, Logan said. Marcus stood abruptly and left the room. Diane followed, whispering something Logan couldn't hear. Trevor and Simone exchanged glances, then gathered their things and filed out. And then it was just Logan and Arya, alone in the conference room with the projector still humming in the background. Arya walked over to the window. She did that a lot, Logan had noticed, like she needed to look at something bigger than the room she was standing in. You're betting everything on this, she said quietly. So are you. I've bet on worse. She turned to face him. But I need to know you understand what's at stake. This isn't just about money. If Apex fails, people lose their jobs. Families lose their income. Entire communities that depend on that factory lose their anchor. You're not just playing with numbers, Logan. You're playing with lives. Logan felt the weight of that settle on him. He'd known it, abstractly, but hearing Arya say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I understand, he said. Do you? Arya stepped closer. Because once you pull this trigger, there's no taking it back. You can't fix it with a clever workaround or a last-minute pivot. You either save them or you don't. Logan swallowed. I know, and I think I can save them. Arya studied him for a long moment. Then she did something Logan didn't expect. She reached out and put a hand on his shoulder. "Then I trust you," she said. The acquisition closed on a Friday. Logan spent the weekend drafting the restructuring plan, coordinating with lawyers, and preparing for this meeting with Apex's remaining board members. He barely slept. He forgot to eat until Jamie brought him a sandwich and told him he looked like a zombie. On Monday morning, Logan walked into Apex's headquarters, a low, sprawling building on the outskirts of the city that smelled like metal and oil and decades of hard work. The board was waiting for him in a conference room that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a long table scarred with coffee rings and pen marks. There were 7 of them left. The others had already resigned or been pushed out. The ones who remained looked exhausted, defensive, and deeply skeptical of the 32-year-old who'd just bought their company. Logan set his folder on the table and didn't bother with small talk. "This company has 4 months to live unless we make changes today," he said. "I'm not here to sugarcoat it or make you feel better. I'm here to tell you what's going to happen, and then you're going to decide if you want to be part of it or not." One of the board members, a man in his 60s with gray hair and a tie that looked older than Logan, leaned back in his chair. "That's quite an opening. It's the truth." "And what makes you think you know the truth better than we do? We've been running this company for 20 years. Logan didn't flinch. "And for the last 5 of those years, you've been running it into the ground, so either you didn't know what you were doing, or you did, and you didn't care. Either way, that ends now." The room went very quiet. Another board member, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, spoke up. "What are you proposing?" Logan opened his folder and slid copies of the restructuring plan across the table. "We renegotiate the debt. We cut operational costs by 15% without touching production. We consolidate the board to 3 voting members. And we go to the airlines with a new pitch. Guaranteed delivery timelines in exchange for long-term contracts with volume commitments." The gray-haired man scanned the document. "You want to cut the board to 3 people?" "Yes." "And who decides who stays?" "I do." Another silence. Logan could see the anger building, could feel the resistance, but he didn't back down. "You don't have a choice," Logan said. "Vaughn Capital owns this company now. You can either work with me to save it, or you can walk away and watch it die. But you don't get to keep doing what you've been doing and expect a different result." The sharp-eyed woman set the document down. "And if we refuse, then you're out, all of you. I'll bring in new board members who actually want this company to survive." The gray-haired man stood, his face flushed with anger. "You arrogant son of a—" "Sit down," the woman said sharply. He stared at her, then at Logan, then slowly sat back down. The woman turned to Logan. "How do we know this will work?" "You don't," Logan said. "But I do, and I'm the one putting my name on it." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, I'm in." One by one, the others either agreed or walked out. By the end of the meeting, Logan had 3 board members who were willing to fight, and 4 who'd resigned on the spot. It was brutal. It was necessary. And Logan felt sick to his stomach the entire time. When he got back to the office, Arya was waiting for him. "How did it go?" she asked. 4 resignations, 3 who stayed." Arya raised an eyebrow. "That's more than I expected." "Yeah, well, turns out people don't like being told they're the problem." "No, they don't." Arya handed him a cup of coffee. "But they needed to hear it." Logan took the coffee and sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I feel like I just destroyed people's lives." You probably did," Arya said, "but you also gave the company a chance to survive. That's the trade-off." "Does it ever get easier?" "No." Arya sat down across from him. "But it gets clearer. You stop second-guessing yourself as much. You learn to live with the cost." Logan looked at her. "Is that what you've done? Learned to live with it?" Arya was quiet for a moment. "I've learned to carry it. That's not the same thing." The next 6 weeks were a war of attrition. Logan spent his days negotiating with union leaders who didn't trust him, airline executives who saw him as a kid playing dress-up, and accountants who kept finding new ways the numbers didn't add up. He worked 18-hour days, sometimes 20. He missed Jamie's school play. He forgot his own birthday. He stopped answering his phone unless it was work-related. And through it all, Arya was there. Not hovering, not micromanaging, but present. She'd show up at midnight with food when Logan forgot to eat. She'd sit across from him in silence while he worked through problems on a whiteboard. She'd ask the questions no one else thought to ask, the ones that forced Logan to sharpen his thinking and see the gaps in his logic. One night, after a particularly brutal negotiation with the machinists' union, Logan collapsed into a chair in Arya's office and put his head in his hands. "I don't know if I can do this," he said. Arya didn't tell him he could. She didn't offer empty reassurances or motivational platitudes. She just said, "What's the next step?" Logan looked up. "What?" "The next step. What do you need to do tomorrow to move this forward?" Logan thought about it. "I need to get the union to agree to a wage freeze in exchange for equity. But they don't trust us. They think we're going to flip the company and leave them with nothing." "Then prove them wrong." "How?" "Show them the numbers. Show them what happens if they don't agree, and then show them what happens if they do. Make it so clear that the choice is obvious." Logan ran a hand through his hair. "And if they still say no? Then you figure out plan B, but you don't give up. Not yet." Logan nodded slowly. "Okay." Arya stood and walked over to her desk, pulling out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. She poured 2 fingers into each and handed one to Logan. "To plan B," she said. Logan clinked his glass against hers. "To plan B." They drank in silence, and for the first time in weeks, Logan felt like he could breathe. The union meeting happened 3 days later. Logan walked into a warehouse filled with 200 machinists, welders, and technicians who looked at him like he was the enemy. He'd brought charts, projections, and a detailed breakdown of what the equity offer would mean for them. But he knew that wasn't going to be enough. Numbers didn't build trust. People did. So instead of starting with the presentation, Logan set the folder down and spoke. "I know you don't trust me," he said. "I wouldn't either. I'm some guy who showed up out of nowhere, bought your company, and started making changes. For all you know, I'm just here to squeeze whatever value I can out of this place and then disappear." A few people nodded, others crossed their arms. "But here's the thing," Logan continued. "I'm not here to flip this company. I'm here to save it. Because if I don't, you lose your jobs. And if you lose your jobs, I lose everything I've put into this. So we're in this together, whether you like it or not." A man in the front row, broad-shouldered with grease-stained hands, spoke up. "Then why should we take a wage freeze? Why should we give up what we've earned?" "Because the alternative is worse," Logan said. "If we don't restructure now, this company folds in 3 months. You lose your jobs, you lose your benefits, you lose everything. The wage freeze buys us time. The equity gives you a stake in the upside. If we turn this around, you profit. If we don't, you're no worse off than you would have been anyway." Another voice from the back. "And what if you're lying?" Logan looked in the direction of the voice. "Then I lose more than you do, because I bet my career on this. I've bet my reputation. I've bet everything I have. So if I'm lying, I'm the biggest idiot in this room." That got a few laughs. Not many, but enough. The broad-shouldered man stood. "Show us the numbers." Logan spent the next hour walking them through the projections. He didn't hide the risks. He didn't sugarcoat the challenges. He showed them exactly what the company was facing and exactly what the equity offer meant. And when he finished, he waited. The union reps huddled together, whispering. Logan stood at the front of the room, trying not to let his nerves show. This was it. If they said no, the whole deal collapsed. Apex would fold. The acquisition would fail, and Logan would be responsible for every single job lost. Finally, the broad-shouldered man turned back to Logan. "We'll take the deal," he said. "But if you screw us, we'll make sure everyone knows." Logan nodded. "Fair enough." When Logan got back to the office, he found Arya waiting with a rare, unguarded smile. "They agreed?" she asked. "They agreed." Arya let out a breath, and Logan realized she'd been just as nervous as he had. "Then we're through the worst of it." "Not yet," Logan said. "We still need the airlines." The airline negotiations were the final piece. Logan had 3 contracts to renegotiate, and the executives on the other side of the table were skeptical that Apex could deliver on its promises. They'd been burned before by missed deadlines and quality issues, and they weren't interested in taking another risk. Logan met with each airline separately. He brought data, testimonials from the union, and a revised production schedule that showed exactly how Apex would meet its commitments. And he made them an offer, a discount on the first year's contract, in exchange for a 3-year commitment with volume guarantees. 2 of the airlines said yes almost immediately. The third, a major carrier that accounted for 30% of Apex's revenue, stalled. Logan flew out to meet with their VP of operations, a woman named Catherine, who had a reputation for being impossible to negotiate with. She met him in a sterile conference room at their headquarters and didn't waste time. "Why should I believe you, she asked. "Because I'm giving you my word," Logan said. "And if I break it, you can walk away. No penalties, no strings." Catherine leaned back. "Your word doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know you. Then get to know me. Come to the factory. Meet the workers. See the production line. And if you don't believe we can deliver, walk away." Catherine studied him. Then she stood. "Fine. Let's go." They flew back that afternoon. Logan gave Catherine a tour of the facility, introduced her to the floor managers, showed her the upgraded equipment and the revised workflows. And at the end of it, Catherine turned to him and said, "You really think you can pull this off?" "I do." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. 3-year contract. But if you miss a single deadline, we're done. Logan shook her hand. Deal. When he called Arya with the news, she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she laughed, a real, genuine laugh that Logan had never heard from her before. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Logan corrected. "No," Arya said. "This was you." Logan hung up and sat in his car in the Apex parking lot, watching the sun set over the factory. He'd done it. Against every odd, against every voice that said he'd fail, he'd saved the company. He'd saved jobs. He'd proven that he was more than just a maintenance worker with good instincts. But as he sat there, he felt something he hadn't expected. Emptiness. He'd spent so long chasing this win that he hadn't thought about what came after, and now that it was over, he didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. He drove home, and when he walked through the door, Jamie was sitting at the kitchen table, working on a drawing. He looked up, and his face lit up in a way that made Logan's chest ache. "Dad, you're home early." Logan glanced at the clock. It was 8:30. Not early by any normal standard, but early by his recent patterns. "Yeah, buddy, I finished the big project." Jamie jumped up and hugged him. "Does that mean we can go to the park this weekend?" Logan held him tight. "Yeah, we can go to the park." And for the first time in weeks, Logan felt like he could breathe. The Saturday after the Apex deal closed, Logan took Jamie to the park like he'd promised. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings where the air smelled like leaves and coffee, and the light hit everything at angles that made the world look softer than it actually was. Jamie ran ahead to the playground, his dinosaur tucked under one arm, and Logan sat on a bench with a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm in his hands. He should have felt triumphant. He'd just pulled off an acquisition that everyone, including Marcus, had said was impossible. Apex was stabilizing. The workers had their jobs. The airlines were satisfied. Vaughn Capital's portfolio had just gained a company worth 5 times what they'd paid for it. By every measure, Logan had succeeded. But sitting there, watching Jamie climb the monkey bars with the kind of fearless confidence only 7-year-olds had, Logan felt hollow. He'd missed so much. School events, bedtime stories, entire weeks where Jamie had gone to sleep before Logan got home and woken up after Logan left. And for what? To prove he was good enough? To show people like Marcus that he belonged? Jamie ran over, breathless and grinning. "Dad, watch this!" Logan watched as his son attempted a flip off the lower bar, landed awkwardly, and scraped his knee. Jamie looked down at the blood, and for a second Logan thought he was going to cry. But instead, Jamie just wiped it with his hand and shrugged. "I'm okay," he said. Logan's throat tightened. "Come here, buddy." He pulled Jamie onto the bench and cleaned the scrape with a tissue and some bottled water. It wasn't deep, but it was enough to remind Logan how fragile everything was, how easily things could go wrong, how much he'd been risking without even realizing it. "Does it hurt?" Logan asked. Jamie shook his head. "Not really. I've had worse." Logan smiled, but it felt weak. "When did you get so tough?" "I don't know." Jamie looked up at him with those big, earnest eyes that saw too much. "You're always tired, so I didn't want to bother you with little stuff." Logan felt something crack inside his chest. He set the tissue down and pulled Jamie into a hug, holding him tighter than he probably should have. "You're not a bother," Logan said quietly. "You're the most important thing in my life. You know that, right?" Jamie nodded against his shoulder. "I know, but you're always working." "I know, and I'm sorry. That's going to change." "Really?" Logan pulled back and looked at his son. "Really, I promise." Jamie smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Logan want to burn the whole world down if it meant keeping that kid safe. They stayed at the park for another 2 hours, and Logan turned his phone off. No emails, no calls. Just him and Jamie and the sound of leaves crunching under their feet. When they got home, Logan made grilled cheese sandwiches, not burnt this time, and they watched a movie about dinosaurs taking over a theme park. Jamie fell asleep halfway through, curled up against Logan's side, and Logan sat there long after the credits rolled, just listening to his son breathe. He thought about Arya's words. "You don't get to keep doing what you've been doing and expect a different result." She'd been talking about Apex's board, but the truth applied to Logan's life too. He couldn't keep sacrificing everything for work and expect Jamie to be okay. He couldn't keep running himself into the ground and expect to be there when it mattered. Something had to change. And this time, Logan was the one who had to make it happen. On Monday morning, Logan walked into Arya's office without knocking. She looked up from her laptop, surprised but not annoyed. "We need to talk," Logan said. Arya closed the laptop. "Okay." Logan sat down. "I need new terms." "What kind of terms?" "I need boundaries. No more 18-hour days, no more working weekends unless it's an actual emergency. I need to be home for dinner at least 4 nights a week, and I need to be able to say no without it being a career-ending decision." Arya leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Where's this coming from?" "Jamie," Logan said. "He told me he doesn't bother me with little stuff because I'm always tired. He's 7. He shouldn't be thinking like that." Arya was quiet for a moment. "You're right. He shouldn't." Logan blinked. He'd expected resistance, an argument. Some version of this is the price of success. Take it or leave it. But Arya just nodded, like what he was asking for was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I'll restructure your portfolio," Arya said. "Bring Trevor and Simone up to speed on the active deals. Delegate more to Marcus and Diane. You'll still lead the big plays, but you won't be carrying everything yourself." Logan stared at her. "That's it? You're just agreeing? Did you think I was going to fight you on this? Honestly?" "Yeah." Arya smiled, but there was something sad in it. "I'm not a monster, Logan. I know what this costs. I've lived it, and I've watched people burn out trying to keep up with what I ask of them." She paused. "But you're different. You have something to protect. Someone who needs you, and I'm not going to be the reason you lose that." Logan felt something shift between them. It wasn't professional anymore. It was personal, real, and it scared him more than any deal ever had. "Thank you," he said quietly. Arya nodded. "Just don't make me regret it." The restructuring happened quickly. Trevor and Simone took on more responsibility, and while they made mistakes, lots of them, they learned fast. Marcus and Diane, to Logan's surprise, didn't push back as much as he'd expected. Diane even pulled him aside one afternoon and said, "It's about time you set some limits. I was starting to worry you'd keel over." Marcus, on the other hand, said nothing, but Logan noticed he'd stopped glaring quite as much. With the new structure in place, Logan's days became more manageable. He still worked hard, but he wasn't drowning anymore. He made it home for dinner most nights. He helped Jamie with homework. He went to the school's fall festival and watched his son win a prize for guessing the number of jelly beans in a jar. "How did you know it was 243? Logan asked on the drive home. Jamie shrugged. "I just counted the ones I could see and then did math." Logan laughed. Of course you did. But the change wasn't just in Logan's schedule. It was in the way people treated him. The advisory team stopped seeing him as Arya's experiment and started seeing him as a peer. Junior analysts came to him with questions. Department heads asked for his input on decisions that had nothing to do with his portfolio. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Logan realized he wasn't invisible anymore. He mattered. His opinions mattered. His presence mattered. And that brought a new kind of pressure. One evening, about 3 weeks after the Apex deal closed, Arya called Logan into her office. It was late, almost 8, but Logan had been about to leave anyway. He walked in to find her standing by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the city. "Everything okay?" Logan asked. Arya turned. "We have a problem." Logan's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could take down everything we've built." She gestured for him to sit, and Logan did, his mind already racing through possibilities. A lawsuit? A failed investment? A regulatory issue? Arya sat down across from him. 3 of our portfolio companies are underperforming. Badly. The renewable energy startup we saved is bleeding cash again. The logistics company is losing contracts, and Apex just lost one of its airline clients. Logan's blood ran cold. "Which one?" "The third one. The one you negotiated last." "Catherine?" Arya nodded. "She says the first shipment missed the deadline by 2 days. They're invoking the penalty clause and walking away." Logan felt like he'd been punched. "That's impossible. I checked the production schedule myself. Everything was on track." Apparently there was a supply chain issue. A parts vendor delayed their shipment, and Apex didn't have the buffer to absorb it. Logan ran a hand through his hair. "Why didn't they tell me?" "They tried. You've been delegating, remember? It went through Trevor, and he didn't escalate it because he thought the team could handle it." Logan closed his eyes. He'd set boundaries. He'd stepped back. And now the thing he'd fought so hard to save was falling apart. "What do we do?" Logan asked. Arya leaned forward. "I need you to go back in. Full time. Fix the supply chain. Rebuild the relationship with Catherine. And do it fast because if Apex collapses, the board is going to want someone's head. And it won't be mine." Logan looked at her. "You're asking me to break the boundaries we just set. I'm asking you to save what you built." "And what about Jamie?" Arya's expression softened. "I don't know. That's your call." Logan sat there, torn between 2 impossible choices. He could dive back into Apex, sacrifice his evenings and weekends, and maybe, save the company. Or he could hold his ground, protect his time with Jamie, and watch everything he'd worked for crumble. He thought about the workers at Apex, the union reps who'd trusted him, the board members who'd stayed because they believed in what he was building. He thought about the families who depended on those jobs, the kids who needed their parents to have stable income. And he thought about Jamie, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing pictures of dinosaurs and waiting for his dad to come home. "I'll fix it," Logan said finally. "But I need help, real help, not Trevor trying to figure it out on his own. I need someone who knows supply chain management inside and out." Arya nodded. "I'll bring in a consultant, best in the business. You'll have them by tomorrow. And I need a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That this is the last time. That after this I get to step back without the world ending." Arya held his gaze. "I can't promise that, Logan. This business doesn't work that way." "Then I need to know it's worth it." "It is," Arya said. "But you're the only one who can decide if it's worth it to you." Logan left her office feeling like he was walking a tightrope over a canyon. One wrong step, and everything fell apart. But he didn't have a choice. He'd made commitments to Arya, to Apex, to the people whose lives depended on decisions he'd made. So he went home, tucked Jamie into bed, and told him he had to work late for a little while. Jamie's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, Dad." Logan kissed his forehead. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too." The consultant Arya brought in was a woman named Renee, mid-50s with silver hair and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded Logan of a drill sergeant. She spent 2 days at the Apex facility, mapping out the supply chain, identifying bottlenecks, and tearing apart the vendor contracts like she was looking for buried treasure. Your problem isn't the factory, Renee said, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in diagrams. It's the vendors. Half of them are unreliable, the other half are overpriced, and none of them have penalty clauses that actually mean anything. Logan crossed his arms. So what's the fix? Drop the bad vendors. Negotiate harder terms with the good ones. And bring some of the production in-house so you're not dependent on external timelines. That'll cost money. Less than losing another airline contract. Logan nodded. Do it. Renee got to work and Logan focused on Catherine. He called her directly, bypassed her assistant, and got her on the phone. Catherine, it's Logan Pierce. I know who you are. Her voice was clipped. And I know why you're calling. The answer is no. We're done. I'm not asking you to reconsider. I'm asking you to give me 5 minutes to explain what happened. She was silent for a moment. 5 minutes. Logan laid it out. The vendor delay, the failure to escalate, the steps they were taking to make sure it never happened again. He didn't make excuses, he didn't blame anyone. He just told her the truth. When he finished, Catherine said, That's all very nice, Logan, but I don't care about what you're fixing. I care about what you deliver. And you didn't deliver. You're right, Logan said. We didn't, and I take full responsibility for that. But I'm asking you to give us one more chance. Let us fulfill the rest of the contract under the original terms. If we miss a single deadline, you walk. No penalties, no arguments. And why should I believe you won't miss another deadline? Because I'm putting myself on the line. If we fail, it's on me, personally. Catherine was quiet. Then she said, One more chance. But Logan, if you screw this up, I won't just walk. I'll make sure every airline in the industry knows what happened. Understood. Logan hung up and exhaled. One more chance. That was all they had. Over the next month, Logan and Renee rebuilt Apex's supply chain from the ground up. They dropped 3 vendors, renegotiated terms with 4 others, and brought 2 critical production steps in-house. It was expensive. It was exhausting. And it worked. The next shipment to Catherine's airline arrived 3 days early. The one after that, 5 days early. By the 3rd shipment, Catherine called Logan herself. I don't know what you did, she said, but keep doing it. Logan smiled. That's the plan. When he told Arya, she actually laughed. You pulled it off again. Barely. Doesn't matter. You did it. She paused. And Logan? I meant what I said. You've earned the right to set your boundaries. Logan looked at her. Thank you. But even as he said it, he knew something had changed. He'd proven he could save companies. He'd proven he could lead. But he'd also proven that he couldn't do it halfway. This world demanded everything, and Logan wasn't sure how much more he had to give. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. Logan had promised Jamie they'd go to his school's science fair. Jamie had built a volcano, complete with baking soda and vinegar, and he was so excited he'd barely slept the night before. But at 4 p.m, Arya called an emergency meeting. One of their portfolio companies was being acquired by a competitor, and they needed to decide whether to sell their stake or fight to block the deal. It was the kind of decision that couldn't wait. Logan called Jamie's babysitter and told her he'd be late. Then he called Jamie. Hey, buddy, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to make it to the science fair. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Jamie's small voice said, You promised. I know, and I'm sorry, but something came up at work and I have to keep. You always have to work. Jamie's voice cracked. You always promise, and then you don't come. Logan felt his chest tighten. Jamie, I don't care. And then Jamie hung up. Logan stared at his phone, his hands shaking. Around him, the advisory team was arguing about valuation and leverage and legal strategies. But all Logan could hear was his son's voice, breaking under the weight of another broken promise. He stood up. Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. I have to go, Logan said. Marcus frowned. We're in the middle of a meeting. I know, and I'm sorry, but I have to go. Arya stood. Logan, we need a decision tonight. Logan looked at her, and for the first time since he'd started at Vaughn Capital, he didn't flinch. Then make it without me. He walked out, grabbed his coat, and drove straight to Jamie's school. The science fair was in the gymnasium, and Logan arrived just as the judges were making their final rounds. He scanned the room and found Jamie standing next to his volcano, arms crossed, looking smaller than he should have. Logan walked over. "Hey, buddy." Jamie looked up, surprised. "You came." "Of course I came. I'm sorry I'm late." Jamie's face crumpled, and he threw his arms around Logan's waist. Logan held him tight, ignoring the stares from the other parents, the weight of the decision he'd just walked away from. "I thought you weren't coming," Jamie whispered. "I'll always come," Logan said. "Even if I'm late, even if I mess up, I'll always come." They stayed at the science fair until it ended. Jamie's volcano didn't win, but he didn't care. He just kept holding Logan's hand like he was afraid if he let go, Logan would disappear. On the drive home, Jamie said, "Dad, are you going to get in trouble for leaving work?" Logan thought about that. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter." "Why not?" Logan glanced at his son. "Because you're more important." When Logan got to the office the next morning, Arya was waiting for him. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. "We made the decision," she said. "We're selling." Logan nodded. "Good. Marcus thinks I should fire you." Logan's stomach dropped. "Are you going to?" Arya shook her head. "No, but I need to know if you're still in this. Because if you're not, tell me now." Logan thought about Jamie, about the promises he'd broken and the ones he'd kept, about the man he used to be and the man he was trying to become. "I'm in," he said, "but on my terms. Jamie comes first, always. If that's a problem, then maybe I'm not the right person for this job." Arya studied him for a long moment, then she smiled. "You're exactly the right person. You just needed to figure that out." And for the first time in months, Logan believed her. The shift in Logan's life didn't happen overnight. It happened in increments, in choices made one morning at a time. He started saying no to meetings that didn't need him. He stopped checking his email after 7. He built a team around him that could handle the daily fires without his constant intervention. And most importantly, he stopped apologizing for putting Jamie first. It wasn't easy. There were still nights when he lay awake wondering if he'd made the right call, if walking out of that emergency meeting had damaged something irreparable. But then he'd remember the way Jamie had looked at him at the science fair, relieved, grateful, like Logan had just proven that promises still meant something, and the doubt would fade. 3 months after that night, Vaughn Capital held its quarterly board meeting. Logan had been invited to present on the portfolio performance, and as he stood in front of the room full of investors and executives, he realized something had changed. They weren't looking at him like an outsider anymore. They were looking at him like someone who belonged. Marcus sat in the back row, arms crossed, but his expression had softened from outright hostility to something closer to grudging respect. Diane sat next to him, taking notes. And Arya sat at the head of the table, watching Logan with an intensity that made him feel both seen and exposed. Logan walked them through the numbers. Apex was profitable. The logistics company had stabilized. The renewable energy startup had found new investors and was expanding into 3 new markets. Every single portfolio company was either meeting or exceeding projections. When he finished, one of the board members, a silver-haired man named Richard, who'd been skeptical of Logan from the beginning, raised his hand. "I'll admit, I didn't think this would work," Richard said. "When Arya brought you on, I thought she was making a mistake. You didn't have the credentials, you didn't have the experience, but you've proven me wrong. More than that, you've shown us what's possible when you stop hiring people who think the same way everyone else does." Logan nodded. "Thank you." Another board member spoke up. "What's next for you, Logan? What's the plan?" Logan glanced at Arya, then back at the board. "The plan is to keep doing what's working. Build strong teams, make smart investments, and make sure I'm home for dinner." That got a few laughs, but Logan wasn't joking. After the meeting, Arya pulled him aside. They walked to her office in silence, and when she closed the door behind them, Logan could tell something was on her mind. "That was good," Arya said, sitting down behind her desk. "Really good. The board is impressed." "But," Logan prompted. Arya smiled faintly. "But nothing. I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of what you've built here. Not just the portfolio. The way you've changed this company. The way you've changed me. Logan blinked. I didn't change you. Yes, you did. Arya leaned back in her chair. Before you got here, I operated on one principle: results over everything. I didn't care about work-life balance. I didn't care if people burned out. I just cared about winning, and I was good at it. But I was also alone. Logan sat down across from her. You're not alone now. No, Arya said quietly. I'm not. And that's because you showed me it was possible to be successful without sacrificing everything else. You set boundaries, you prioritized your son, and you still delivered results. That's not something I thought could be done. Logan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't noticed before. Arya wasn't just brilliant and ruthless and driven. She was lonely. She'd spent so long building walls around herself that she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. You could have that too, you know, Logan said. Have what? A life outside of this. People who matter. Things that make you happy. Arya smiled, but it was sad. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. You're good at learning. She laughed, and it was genuine. You make it sound easy. It's not, but it's worth it. Arya was quiet for a moment, and Logan could see her turning the idea over in her mind, testing it for flaws. Then she nodded, almost to herself. Maybe you're right, she said. Over the next few weeks, Logan noticed small changes in Arya. She started leaving the office earlier. She stopped scheduling meetings after 6. She even took a weekend off, her first in 2 years, and came back looking more rested than Logan had ever seen her. What did you do? Logan asked when she walked into the office on Monday morning. I went hiking, Arya said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Logan grinned. Hiking? Don't sound so surprised. I used to hike all the time before I started this company. I just forgot. Well, it looks good on you. Arya raised an eyebrow. Is that your professional opinion? Logan laughed. It's my human opinion. The dynamic between them had shifted too. It wasn't just professional anymore. There was a warmth there, a trust that went beyond business. They had lunch together sometimes. Not working lunches, just lunches. They talked about things that had nothing to do with acquisitions or portfolios. Arya told him about growing up with parents who expected perfection and never got it. Logan told her about the startup that failed and the marriage that fell apart, and the years he spent thinking he'd never amount to anything. And somewhere in those conversations, Logan realized he cared about Arya in a way that had nothing to do with work. She wasn't just his boss. She was his friend. Maybe more than that, though he didn't let himself think about it too hard. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, Logan was packing up his desk when Arya appeared in his doorway. Got a minute? She asked. Always. She walked in and sat down, and Logan could tell from her expression that something was bothering her. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing's wrong, Arya said. I've just been thinking about what you said about having a life outside of this. Logan waited. I've spent my entire adult life building this company, Arya continued, and I'm proud of what I've built. But I don't have anyone to share it with. No family, no close friends, no one who knows me as anything other than Arya Vaughn, CEO of Vaughn Capital. That's not true, Logan said. I know you. Arya looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes that Logan had never seen before. Do you? I think so. You're brilliant and driven and terrifying when you want to be. But you're also kind, even when you pretend not to be. You're generous with people who earn your trust, and you care about doing the right thing, even when it's not the profitable thing. Arya's throat worked. That's a nicer version of me than I deserve. It's the version I see. She held his gaze for a long moment, and Logan felt something shift between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Thank you, Arya said finally, for seeing me. Logan smiled. Any time. The catalyst came on a Friday afternoon. Logan was at Jamie's school, watching him play soccer in a game that was far more chaotic than competitive. Jamie wasn't particularly good at soccer. He spent most of the game chasing butterflies, but he was having fun, and that was all that mattered. Logan's phone buzzed. It was a text from Arya. Can you come to the office? Something's happened. Logan's stomach dropped. He texted back. How urgent? Very. Logan looked at Jamie, then at his phone. He thought about all the times he'd chosen work over his son, all the broken promises and missed moments, and then he thought about the man he was trying to become. He texted back. I'll be there in 2 hours. Jamie's game ends at 5. There was a pause. Then Arya replied, Okay. When the game ended, Jamie's team lost, but Jamie didn't seem to notice. Logan took him out for ice cream. They sat at a small table outside the shop, and Jamie talked nonstop about the game, about his friend Marcus, who scored a goal, about the butterfly he'd seen that had orange and black wings. Logan listened, really listened, and felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't felt in months. This was what mattered, this moment, this kid. Everything else was just noise. At 6:30, Logan dropped Jamie off with the babysitter and drove to the office. Arya was in the conference room with Marcus, Diane, and a man Logan didn't recognize. The man was in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit and an expression that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. Logan, this is David Chen, Arya said. He's the CEO of Titan Ventures. Logan shook his hand. Titan Ventures was one of the biggest private equity firms in the country. They didn't just compete with Vaughn Capital, they dominated the space Vaughn was trying to break into. Nice to meet you, Logan said. David smiled. I've heard a lot about you. Arya says you're the reason her portfolio has been outperforming the market. Logan glanced at Arya. I'm part of the reason. It's a team effort. Modest, David said. I like that. He turned to Arya. I'll get straight to the point. Titan wants to acquire Vaughn Capital. We're offering 3 times your current valuation, and we want you to stay on as a managing partner. Full autonomy over your portfolio, plus access to Titan's resources and capital. Logan's blood ran cold. He looked at Arya, but her expression was unreadable. And if I say no? Arya asked. David shrugged. Then we compete. And you know how that ends. Titan has more capital, more connections, more leverage. We'll outbid you on every deal, poach your best people, and grind you down until you have no choice but to sell at a much lower valuation. The room went silent. Logan could see Marcus and Diane exchanging glances, could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on all of them. Can we have the room? Arya said. David nodded. Take your time, but I need an answer by Monday. He left, and the door clicked shut behind him. Arya walked over to the window and stared out at the city, her back to the rest of them. What do you think? She asked. Marcus spoke first. I think we should take the deal. 3 times valuation is incredible. And with Titan's resources, we could scale faster than we ever could on our own. Diane nodded. I agree. This is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. Arya turned to Logan. And you? Logan thought about it. He thought about the company they'd built, the risks they'd taken, the people whose lives had changed because of the decisions made in this building. He thought about Arya's vision, her refusal to compromise, her belief that they could build something better than what already existed. I think it depends on what you want, Logan said. If you want to be rich and powerful and have access to unlimited resources, take the deal. But if you want to build something that's yours, something that reflects your values and your vision, then tell David to go to hell. Arya smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. Marcus frowned. You're seriously considering turning this down? I'm seriously considering what matters more, Arya said. Money or meaning? You can have both, Diane said. Not with Titan, Logan said. They'll say you have autonomy, but the second you make a decision they don't like, they'll override you. You'll be a managing partner in name only. Everything you've built will belong to them. Arya looked at Logan, and he could see her weighing the decision. It wasn't just about money, it was about identity, about whether she was willing to let go of the things she'd spent her entire adult life building. Finally, she turned to Marcus and Diane. Thank you for your input. I'll make my decision over the weekend. They left, and then it was just Logan and Arya. What are you going to do? Logan asked. Arya sat down, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. I don't know. Part of me wants to take the deal. It would be easier, safer. I wouldn't have to fight anymore. And the other part? The other part wants to tell David where he can shove his offer. Logan smiled. That sounds more like you. Arya laughed, but it was hollow. What if I'm wrong? What if I turn this down and Titan crushes us? Then we fight back, and we keep fighting until we win or we go down swinging. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's honest. Arya looked at him, and Logan saw something shift in her expression. Why do you believe in me so much? Logan didn't hesitate. Because you believed in me when no one else did. You saw something in a maintenance worker that no one else saw. You gave me a chance when you had no reason to, and you trusted me to build something real. That's not something I take lightly. Arya's eyes glistened, and she looked away quickly, like she didn't want him to see. Thank you. For what? For reminding me who I am. That weekend, Logan took Jamie to the beach. They built sandcastles and chased waves and ate hot dogs from a vendor who charged too much. And as they sat on the sand watching the sunset, Jamie leaned against Logan's shoulder and said, "This is my favorite day ever." Logan wrapped an arm around him. Mine too, buddy. On Monday morning, Arya called David Chen and told him the deal was off. Logan wasn't in the room, but he heard about it from Diane, who looked equal parts shocked and impressed. She just said no, Diane told him. Didn't negotiate, didn't counteroffer. Just said Vaughn Capital wasn't for sale and hung up. Logan grinned. Good for her. When he saw Arya later that day, she was standing in her office, looking out at the city with her arms crossed. Logan knocked on the doorframe. You doing okay? He asked. Arya turned. I just turned down more money than most people see in a lifetime. And I feel great. Logan walked over and stood next to her. What happens now? Now we build, Arya said. We take everything we've learned and we build something better than Titan could ever imagine. I'm in. Arya looked at him, and there was something in her eyes that Logan couldn't quite name. I know. Over the next year, Vaughn Capital grew in ways Logan hadn't thought possible. They closed deals that reshaped entire industries. They built partnerships with companies that shared their values. And they did it without compromising, without cutting corners, without sacrificing the things that mattered. But more than that, the company culture changed. Arya implemented flexible schedules. She hired people who had something to prove, not just people with the right degrees. She created mentorship programs and parental leave policies, and a dozen other things that made Vaughn Capital feel less like a machine and more like a community. And Logan became the kind of leader he'd always wanted to be. He mentored Trevor and Simone, watched them grow into roles they'd been terrified to take on. He worked with Marcus, who eventually admitted that Logan had been right about more things than he cared to count. He even became friends with Diane, who turned out to have a wicked sense of humor once you got past the corporate armor. But the biggest change was in his relationship with Arya. They spent more time together, not just at work, but outside of it. They went to museums and coffee shops and bookstores. They talked about everything and nothing. And slowly, carefully, they let their walls down. One evening, after a particularly long day, Arya asked Logan if he wanted to grab dinner. Not a working dinner, just dinner. They went to a small Italian place that Arya loved, and over pasta and wine, they talked about their lives. Arya told him about the loneliness of being at the top, about the fear that if she let anyone too close, they'd see her as weak. Logan told her about the guilt he carried from his failed marriage, about the constant worry that he wasn't enough for Jamie. You're more than enough, Arya said. Jamie knows that. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you knows that. Logan looked at her, and something in his chest shifted. You know, when we first met, I thought you were terrifying. Arya smiled. And now? Now I think you're terrifying and brilliant and one of the best people I've ever met. Arya's expression softened. Logan, I'm not saying this because I expect anything, Logan said quickly. I just want you to know that you matter, to me, a lot. Arya reached across the table and took his hand. You matter to me too. They sat there for a moment, hands clasped, and Logan felt something click into place. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was just two people who'd been through hell together, realizing they didn't want to go through life apart. 6 months later, Arya met Jamie for the first time. Logan had been nervous, terrified actually, but Arya had been calm. She'd shown up at their apartment with a book about dinosaurs and a genuine interest in hearing about Jamie's latest obsession. Jamie had been suspicious at first. "Are you Dad's boss?" "I am," Arya said, "but I'm also his friend." "Do you make him work all the time?" Arya glanced at Logan, then back at Jamie. "I used to, but your dad taught me that there are more important things than work." Jamie considered that. Like dinosaurs? Exactly like dinosaurs. From that moment on, Jamie adored her, and Arya, who'd spent her whole life convinced she didn't know how to connect with people, discovered that she was actually pretty good at it when she stopped trying so hard. 2 years after Logan first walked into Arya's office to fix an elevator, Vaughn Capital was named one of the top venture firms in the country. They'd outperformed every projection, outlasted every competitor who tried to crush them, and built a reputation for doing business with integrity. At the celebration party, Logan stood in the corner with a glass of champagne, watching the room full of people who'd once doubted him. Marcus raised his glass in Logan's direction, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Diane gave him a genuine smile. Trevor and Simone were laughing with some of the newer hires, telling stories about the early days. And Arya stood in the center of it all, radiant and confident, talking to investors who hung on her every word. Logan felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Jamie standing there, dressed in a suit that was slightly too big. "You came," Logan said, surprised. "Arya invited me," Jamie said. "She said I should see what you've been working on." Logan knelt down so they were eye level. "And what do you think?" Jamie looked around the room. "I think you're really good at your job, but I'm still glad you come home for dinner." Logan pulled him into a hug. "Me too, buddy." Later that night, after the party had ended and the guests had gone home, Logan and Arya stood on the roof of Zenith Tower looking out at the city. The light stretched out below them, endless and beautiful. "We did it," Arya said quietly. "You did it," Logan corrected. "I just helped." "That's not true." Arya turned to face him. "None of this would have happened without you. You changed everything. You changed me." Logan smiled. "We changed each other." Arya stepped closer. "I spent my whole life thinking I had to choose success or connection, power or happiness. But you showed me I could have both, that I didn't have to do it alone." "You were never alone," Logan said. "You just didn't know it yet." Arya kissed him then, and it was soft and tentative and perfect. And when they pulled apart, Logan saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on me." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, and Logan realized something. He'd spent so long thinking success was about proving himself, about showing the world he was more than what they saw. But the truth was simpler than that. Success wasn't about being seen. It was about being known. By the people who mattered, by the kid who waited for him at home, by the woman who'd trusted him when he didn't trust himself. And that was worth more than any deal, any title, any amount of money. Logan had started as a maintenance worker, invisible and overlooked. Now he was a partner at one of the most successful firms in the country, a father who showed up, and a man who'd proven that where you start doesn't determine where you end up. But more than that, he'd found something he never expected, a family. Not the traditional kind, but a family nonetheless. Jamie, with his dinosaurs and his big questions. Arya, with her sharp mind and her slowly opening heart. And himself, finally comfortable in his own skin. The man once invisible had become indispensable, but he'd also become something more important. He'd become whole. And that, Logan thought as he held Arya close and looked out at the city he'd helped reshape, was the only success that truly mattered.